North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. It's true. We report the news, the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. We sift the news out of propaganda that somehow has become the news. In other words, yeah, this is the news broadcast that the United States needs. Because we're not playing games with the news. We're simply explaining what's going on. So we give you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. There is commentary. That's not the news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And then there's debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report, hour number 3. This is the third podcast. We talked about immigration in the last hour. We spent a little bit of time talking about Donald Trump and the food fight between Donald Trump and the DOJ. And, oh, by the way, notable courts like the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, not to mention the Federal District Court for the Southern District of Florida. And so we've done a lot of work today, and we've got more to do. What is going on right now is the yearly pilgrimage to New York City by people who are United Nations ambassadors. The United Nations is located in Manhattan in some of the most, right smack dab in some of the most expensive real estate in the world. And the United Nations itself is a collection of socialist governments intermingled with governments that are not socialist that actually work. And all of these poor, corrupt, ridiculous socialist nations essentially show up at the United Nations to lord over and tell far more successful, far less corrupt, far more accomplished nations how they should be living. It is an absolute worthless organization. It's absolutely worthless. All it is an excuse to be able to get a whole bunch of people together and say, hey, we've got to be able to gather someplace and talk. Well, no. What they do is they gather someplace and try to pin war crimes on the United States of America and just do horrifyingly anti-American things. Now, you can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about the United Nations taking shots at the United States. You can't do anything about it. But you can sure as hell get it out of this country and put it someplace else. A few years ago, I came up with a brilliant idea. And I mean, it was brilliant. The brilliant idea that we should move the United Nations to Jerusalem. It still makes me laugh. It's a perfect city for it. It's absolutely perfect, isn't it? We should move the United Nations to Jerusalem. Why not? Just warms the cockle of my heart every time I bring that up. Anyway, so this anti-American cavalcade of stupidity shows up every year. This is the 77th session, the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's happening in New York. People have to deal with it in New York. They don't like dealing with it in New York. So what happened was Fox News went out into New York and said, hey, what do you think about the United Nations? People in New York are questioning the effectiveness of the United Nations and the amount of money it spends as they come to town for the 77th General Assembly session. Elias told Fox News, I'm not a fan of the UN. It's a money-making, corrupt organization. Hear, hear. Giovanni, an Italian who moved to Brooklyn in 1977, made similar remarks. I'll tell you the truth. I don't know why they exist. Neither do I. Neither do I. The United Nations is comprised of 193 nations. It was formed after World War II to maintain worldwide peace and develop friendly relations and coordinations between the nations. It's not working. It is, however, a part of the United Nations Charter. Yes. Maintain worldwide peace, develop friendly relations and coordination between the nations. World leaders gather at the annual General Assembly in New York to debate important issues facing the world. And of course, it's all been hijacked by climate change, which is nothing more than these same politicians swindling their people at home and then getting together at the United Nations and laugh about swindling their people at home. You know, this is interesting. I am the premier. Okay, I'm the dictator of Lost in a Sewer Stan. Lost in a Sewer Stan is our country, and what's fascinating is we've got an amazing famine and horrible public health diseases and so on and so forth, and we've got all that kind of stuff. But we're here to tell the United States how to run its business. And anyway, I was just sitting there going, we really do need to do something about this climate. We can't feed our people. We can't have basic sanitation. We can't do any of that. But what we can do, if we all get together, we can control the weather. Wrong answer. 193 nations. Totally useless. Steve told Fox News, I wish they would do something. I know there's a UN. I know the world leaders meet almost every year. Unfortunately, they have a very bad press secretary, but because we don't ever hear of anything they're doing, and they're not doing nothing. Yeah. Renato said he doesn't think the UN is effective. It should do more. I think it should be restructured in some way, said Brent. This year's General Assembly focuses on the war in Ukraine. What are they going to do about that? Nothing. The energy crisis. What are they going to do about that? Nothing. Climate action. How is the swindling of all of the 193 nations around the world, how's the swindling of the public there going this year? They are doing something with that. They're collecting money hand over fist to do something that no one can do, which is control the weather. And they're talking about ending the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, you could probably not only end the COVID-19 pandemic, but you could also end any other pandemic simply by holding China accountable for the last 3 or 4 pandemics we've had that all originated in their country, not unlike SARS-CoV-2. Either they're throwing biological weapons at the entire world, or they live in a sewer. One of the two things is happening. Either way, they should be held accountable for either way. But of course, that's one of the interesting things about China. They bribed the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization? Oh yeah, that's a part of the United Nations. The United States has no business in this stupid, feckless, idiotic organization. Idiotic organization. Maybe their goals are pretentious, said Brent. Set some realistic goals and see what could happen with that. Well, what do you do, actually? Do you send food to starving nations? No. You send them tractors. You send them know-how. That's what you should be doing. You should be teaching them how to fish instead of giving them fish. That's what you should be doing. The United Nations should be the world's biggest international trade school. They should not just willy-nilly go and solve everybody's problems. What they should do is they should go over there and teach them how to solve their own problems. That's one change I'd make in the United Nations immediately. Well, the first change I'd make is moving it to Jerusalem. The second move I'd make is to make sure that it was the world's largest international trade school. So these people could learn how to actually build a country instead of stealing from it. United Nations has carried on 71 peacekeeping operations since 1947. It's amazing how many American troops are killed in those peacekeeping operations. In recent years, the international body has put its energy behind social justice issues. Yeah, it's all our fault. It hosts an annual climate change conference, adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which includes goals such as ending poverty, ensuring equitable education, and gender equity, according to its website. I think they could do a lot more than what they're doing, says Michael. They're just sitting around telling people, do this, do that. If they're the United Nations, they can come and help out Ukraine a little bit more and not have the United States foot the entire bill for everything, whether it's humanitarian aid or arms or whatever, said Michael. The United States contributed $11.6 billion to the United Nations in 2020, making it its largest donor, followed by China, Germany, and Japan. Brent said, I don't think it's worth it. I don't either. As far as the amounts of money that are spent and what they're able to produce, if it was a private enterprise, we'd have to do away with it. They'd have to declare themselves bankrupt. Well, one thing, that's just a financial term. They are intellectually bankrupt anyway, already. Michael continued, I think we should be contributing. I don't know what the breakdown is like, but Germany shouldn't be paying a fraction of what we pay. Well, I don't know about that. Organizations within the United Nations spent $30 billion in 2021. $11 billion of it was ours. 1/3 of what the UN spent in 2021 was spent with American money. And for what? I have not seen or heard where the United Nations gives back to the United States. They don't. Renato added, it's not well spent. We should continue supporting the United Nations, no question about it, but we should also demand more activity, more intervention in whatever they do. Actually, oversight would do it. Michael suggested the U.S. allocate some of those funds for domestic purposes. You can fix the homeless crisis. You can fix paid maternity leave. There are a million different ways you can repurpose $11.1 billion. Brent continued and questioned the U.S.'s ability to use taxpayer dollars effectively. I have no doubt that if we weren't spending it there, we'd find some other way to waste it here. It's not like we're doing a very good job on spending right now. By the way, what do you think about the United Nations? I know. I'm a complete bore when it comes to the United Nations. I want it out of New York. I want it out of New York. You know, I want it to be the absolute least coveted ambassadorship in the entire State Department. I want the United States to pay a fair amount of money. And $11.1 billion is too much. If they spent $30 billion last year and $11.1 million of it was ours, no. I'm sorry. We just don't get our money's worth out of that organization. Jesse says the United Nations is a sham. It is a sham. Somebody else says United Nations equals one world order. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's where we're going to elect the president of the world, I guess. Yeah, we're going to have one world government. The United Nations? Pass. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The 77th General Assembly of the United Nations is starting today. And we just spent a little bit of time asking whether or not the United Nations was worth anything. So far, I haven't seen anybody standing up for the United Nations, but I know because of this article in The Hill, there are people who stand up for the United Nations. According to their research, 47% of Americans support the United Nations. This according to a brand new poll. Yeah. The divide is seen between Democrats who generally favor the United Nations and Republicans who view it more negatively. This is a Morning Consult poll. It was published last Wednesday. It shows 64% of Democrats surveyed have a positive view of the UN, while only 36% of Republicans say the same thing. 36%. Additionally, 39% of Republicans polled hold an unfavorable view of the UN, while only 12% of Democrats do. The survey was derived from daily polls conducted from August 1st to August 31st with a total of roughly 17,350 adults. The margin of error is plus or minus 1 percentage point. So that's pretty good poll. 17,350 respondents, pretty good. Since the U.S. joined the international body in 1945, it's not 1945, it was 1947. When it was first created, the country has remained a major contributor. Expressed negative views of the United Nations. 39 Republicans, 39%, Democrats, 12%. Former President Trump was critical of the UN as well as other international organizations during his presidency and withdrew the U.S. from the UN Human Rights Council and the Paris Climate Accords. Under President Biden, the country rejoined both of those last year. Trump also formally declared the U.S. would leave the United Nations World Health Organization, but Biden reversed that decision as well. After, by the way, President Trump took us out of the World Health Organization because it was found that it was essentially being bribed by China. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. What a corrupt organization. It's just terrible. Let's see. 33% of American voters surveyed the U.S. should increase its involvement with the international organization. 23% said the U.S. should decrease its involvement. I'm for that one. The margin of error for the survey of registered voters is plus or minus 2 percentage points. U.S. ranks low among the dozens of nations in terms of the share of adults in each country that hold favorable views of the UN, according to Morning Consult. Countries where there's a smaller proportion of adults were found to support the body, including China, Russia, Japan, Israel, and Turkey. Nations where a high proportion of adults were found to support the UN include Nigeria, Poland, Norway, and Sweden. The surveys were conducted in the U.S., roughly 52,000 adults with a margin of error plus or minus 1 percentage point, and other countries among approximately 500 to 5,000 adults with a margin of error up to 4 percentage points. So it's an amalgam of a lot. Oh, that's a big word, isn't it? Amalgam. Oh, yes. Amalgam. Yeah. Yep. So here we go. So Democrats and Republicans, in varying degrees, can support or hate the United Nations. I can only hate the United Nations because it's useless. I guess it made sense when we were in the Cold War. And there were nuclear weapons pointed at people. But that's not the case anymore. There's still nuclear weapons, but nobody's actually spoiling to send one anywhere. The only people that are even considering it is China. They're not going anywhere for a while, like 20 years. So yeah, why not just get rid of it? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. On the first hour podcast, we do 3 every day. On the first hour, we talked a little bit about the food fight between President Donald Trump and the Department of Justice, as there are all kinds of intrigue. Justice Eileen Cannon appointed a special master. That special master is Judge Raymond Dearie. Judge Dearie had his first hearing with the two parties, the DOJ and Donald Trump, regarding the materials and documents that he has been charged as special master to go through to determine which of the documents are privileged information or attorney-client privilege and executive privilege. Well, we're finally getting some news out of some of that, and time for me to share some of that with you. The Washington Post reports it this way: a special master pressed President Donald Trump's attorneys to move quickly and provide more answers about whether the former president did or did not classify documents marked top secret that were found in his Florida home last month, saying, quote, "You can't have your cake and eat it too," unquote. If they want to argue the documents might not still be secret. So they got to prove whether they're secret or not. Very reasonable. At his first meeting with lawyers for Trump and the Justice Department in his new role as special master, U.S. District Court Judge Raymond J. Dearie urged the Trump side to spell out its position on the question of roughly 100 documents marked classified that were taken by FBI agents as part of a court-authorized search of Mar-a-Lago on August 8th. Dearie told the lawyers, quote, "We have little time to complete the tasks assigned to the court." He wants them to quickly resolve legal questions about high-profile national security investigations into former president, who frequently indicates he may again seek the White House. "We are going to proceed with what I call responsible dispatch," said Judge Dearie. Dearie issued no rulings at today's hearing, his first as special master, but he made it clear that if Trump's side remained silent on the question of whether or not their client had at some point in his presidency declassified the documents, Dearie was likely to agree with prosecutors the documents at the heart of the case were still classified. Trump's legal team has argued making them answer that question would put them at a disadvantage in the face of a possible future criminal prosecution or a future legal fight over getting seized documents returned to President Trump. When Trump defense attorney James Trusty told Dearie that he should not be forced to disclose declarations and witness statements yet, Dearie replied, quote, "My view is you can't have your cake and eat it too," unquote, signaling he may not have much patience for that argument in the special master review as the special master review proceeds. So that's the way the Washington Post says it. Here is Reuters' version of the story. The U.S. judge appointed to review documents seized last month by the FBI from Donald Trump's Florida home raised doubts about the former president's claim that he should not yet review whether the documents were classified or not. In his first public hearing since the appointment as special master, Judge Raymond Dearie, serving as an independent arbiter or special master to vet the documents, pressed Trump lawyers about whether or not they had any evidence to show that Trump declassified those records. Trump is under investigation for retaining government records, some marked as highly classified, at the Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, his home after leaving office in January of 2021. President Trump has denied wrongdoing and has said without providing evidence that the investigation is a partisan attack. Trump has claimed in social media posts he declassified the records, but his lawyers have not made such a statement in court filings. "You did bring a lawsuit," Dearie told Trump attorney James Trusty after Trusty said the lawyers were not in a position to say the former president's declassified the documents until they can first review the records. "You did bring a lawsuit." Dearie, a senior federal judge in Brooklyn, will help decide of the more than 11,000 documents seized August 8th, whether they should be kept from the Justice Department's criminal investigation into the former president's handling of the documents. Dearie will recommend to the U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon, who is presiding over the fight to access the seized documents, which records may fall under attorney-client privilege or an assertion of executive privilege, which allows a president to withhold certain documents or information. Today's hearing came a day after Dearie circulated a draft plan to both sides, which sought details on documents Trump allegedly declassified. In a letter filed ahead of today's hearing, Trump lawyers argued it was not the time to address Deary's questions, and it would force them to disclose a defense to any subsequent indictment, an acknowledgement that the investigation could lead to criminal charges. That's probably true. The Trump legal defense team is working under the idea that a federal indictment is on the way. So today, Trustee told Deary he believes Deary's request to provide a declassification defense goes beyond the scope of what Cannon asked him to do. Deary said he was taken aback by that claim. Deary said, "I think I'm doing what I'm told." The Justice Department appealed a portion of the Cannon ruling, which, by the way, we've already discussed in the first hour of this of today's collection of podcasts. That's hour number 1, so go check that out. And we'll see exactly what goes on with that. So that's Reuters. Here's CBS News. This is their rendition of the story. Lawyers for former President Donald Trump entered a filing pushing back on U.S. District Judge Raymond Deary's request the former president clarify actions he took to declassify material seized during the August 8th search of his Mar-a-Lago residence. The filing follows Deary's appointment last week to serve as an independent arbiter or special master. Trump attorneys referenced a draft plan by Deary that required the plaintiff, that is Trump, to disclose specific information regarding the declassification to the court and to the government. Deary has scheduled a hearing to take place at a federal court in Brooklyn Tuesday at 2 p.m. Well, that's already happened, by the way. In the filing Monday night, lawyers for the former president suggested they may not comply and argued that any declarations regarding the declassification of documents could potentially be used as a defense against any future criminal charges. Okay. So that's the news that we have regarding today's hearing. Okay. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. Raymond Deary, Judge Deary, is doing exactly what he should do. Okay, Mr. President, you declassified these documents. How did that process come down? Give me the who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay, that's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. What's interesting here is that it all but confirms something I asserted in the first hour of the Wells report, that the reason that Donald Trump has these classified documents is because they are evidence. They're evidentiary exhibits for a future problem that he expects from the DOJ. This is a thorny judicial issue here. You know, I refer to judges in a lot of ways, probably unfairly, that especially federal appellate judges, that they are idiot legalist savants. In other words, they don't know anything unless it's written down in a book. Supreme Court Justice Dave Souter is a perfect example of who I was talking about. As a matter of fact, he was the guy I was talking about when I first used the term idiot legalist savant. And so the idea that Judge Deary would say, well, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you can't show that this has been declassified, then it's still classified. And that's what he would report to Judge Eileen Cannon. But if these documents are actually pieces of evidence that prove that Donald Trump is innocent of charges that may be coming from the federal government, the possibility that they be they be declared classified and then compelled to be returned to a Department of Justice that is already proven that it withholds exculpatory evidence from people they want to convict. That creates a major problem for President Trump. Now, remember, the special master was brought up by the Trump legal team. And I said at the outset of that, I said, you know, that can work either way. It can work to President Trump's benefit or to his detriment. The way I see it at this particular moment, this is just my opinion. The way I see it at this particular moment is the president is going to want to hang on to those documents. because they tell a story that he once told. Now, we don't know what that story is. But if Donald Trump's lawyers wants to keep those under wraps until they find out about some kind of charges that may be coming from the Department of Justice, which, by the way, I think would be a disaster. But if that's what they're doing, then those documents, then we now know why the FBI went in there in the first place. And it doesn't have anything to do with other nations' nuclear codes or anything, nuclear weapons or the United States nuclear codes or any of that stuff. Now, if this is truly evidence against Donald Trump's enemies, then what we have is Donald Trump's enemies using the cover of law to continue a cover-up. So what may be happening is the DOJ, under color of office, is trying to get control of those documents. So, what's the next possible move? Well, I believe it was 1971, when Daniel Ellsberg released what became known as the Pentagon Papers. I remember when the WikiLeaks leak, Edward Snowden released all those papers. This entire process may be pushing Donald Trump into publishing classified information in order to clear himself of one problem while ensnaring him in another problem. It doesn't make any difference what the actual classified documents are. If they remain classified and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, spills them, well, that's a crime. And then the American left would have Donald Trump where they want him. Completely and totally disqualified from running for president in 2024. So what will President Trump do? Well, as far as I know, Judge Dearie is working for Judge Eileen Cannon. Judge Eileen Cannon gave President Trump what he wanted, which was a special master to review all the documents independent of the DOJ. Since that does include, and it certainly does, because the FBI has already said so, since those documents include attorney-client privileged documents, and most certainly documents that are indeed claimed under presidential executive privilege. What's going to happen is that we're going to see that Judge Eileen Cannon is going to have to continue with her idea of fairness. So if indeed these classified documents are exhibits of evidence for Donald Trump, what she might do, because she's going to get the results of this special master work, what she might do is she might shield those documents. But that would be a very big decision on the part of a federal district judge, and it would absolutely be appealed back to the 11th Circuit Court. And I don't see the 11th Circuit Court understanding, because of this idiot legalist savant idea, I don't see them operating outside the vacuum, even if it would be unfair, just as President Trump's lawyers say, even though it would be unfair to tip his hand under these circumstances. This one's tough. This one's tough. I'm not spinning it, Isaac. I'm explaining it. Okay? You're poisoned by politics. Yes, Judge Cannon gave Trump everything he asked for. And this may end up being, be careful what you ask for because you might just get it. Yeah. So, by the way, Isaac, if he declassified the documents, they haven't proved that he's declassified it yet because they haven't been compelled to. They just got the order. We don't know what the time frame is on that. We'll see. But the next couple of days ought to be mighty interesting. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. If you are a longtime listener of this broadcast, then you know how this broadcast came to be. It happened as the result of the 9/11 attacks on 9/11 2001. When that happened, I went to the radio station where I was working and started working because I knew that I needed to be there and just doing whatever I could do, making coffee, making sandwiches, producing radio broadcasts, etc. And my boss came to me and said that you would be on beginning at 6 p.m. Go as long as you want. Do what you think is the right thing. And so I started working on the broadcast. And I realized the John David Wells Show wasn't going to get it. So I changed the name of the broadcast to the Wells Report because the report was the most important thing on the broadcast. It wasn't John David Wells, it was the report. And I was doing the reporting, so the Wells Report seemed to make sense. The first guest that I had on that broadcast was a brilliant man named Richard Steinberg. Richard Steinberg started out as a soldier, ended up being a covert operator, moved on from there to all manner of covert operations in many different guises and for many different people, including a government contractor who had one client. That's all I'm going to tell you. But he was also a brilliant, gifted writer. He was the author of The Gemini Man. He was the author of The Four-Phase Man. Nobody's Safe. Is about to become, by the way, I believe it's going to be it's going to end up being a broadcast on a streaming channel. And I'll be watching it with great enthusiasm because these books are awesome. Rick became one of my closest friends and taught me an immeasurable amount, covering an immeasurable number of topics. He helped me with my writing. He helped me understand the world of covert operations, especially counterterrorism, which he helped me indulge what was a little bit of nascent talent for. As you might have figured out already, I'm talking about Rick Steinberg in past tense. Because last night, Rick Steinberg, my friend and brother, passed away. The things that he taught me and the things that he showed me and read me into, most of which I can't talk about, have sustained this broadcast ever since the first one, where he was the first guest. He was instrumental in refining my ability to do the research necessary for this broadcast. He told me what rocks to look under, which rabbit holes to avoid. He taught me that I actually did have a great deal of talent for what he had done. And he wanted to feed some of that as far as he could without screwing up his security clearances and non-disclosure agreements, etc. But Rick Steinberg's fingerprints are all over this broadcast. From the way that it's actually researched, the way that it's produced, from a standpoint of intellectual effort, the ability to sort through the chaff to get to the wheat, and then to know which kernels of wheat are important and which ones aren't. A lot of that came from Rick. And just like any good campfire, the person who builds it starts small, and pretty soon it catches fire all by itself. And Rick gave me that small campfire that has sustained this broadcast for the last 21 years. Rick Steinberg was exactly 1 year older than me. And he is gone. There will be an awful lot of people whose names you'll never know, who will be raising a glass to someone you only know as Rick Steinberg, all around the world tonight. One of these days, I'll tell you a story about a pizza place in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Rick Steinberg. May God keep you close, because he's going to need someone to help him out. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us on the Wells Report.